This week, is the U.S. economy headed into a period of stagflation? More in this week's episode.
Building relationships is the way Mutual of Omaha has grown into one of the leading financial services companies in the world. Our reverse mortgage wholesale division is proud to carry on this 100-plus year tradition. To your borrowers, a reverse mortgage is more than a transaction. It's a promise of a better, more stress-free life. Our goal is to provide you, our valued client, with the best service and support possible so you can focus on helping your borrowers achieve the retirement of their dreams.
Welcome back. Stagflation is not where we find ourselves today, but it could be where we're headed. Today, we're going to examine the wider impacts of stagflation on our economy, but more specifically, its consequences for older Americans and retirees. I actually lived it, but I was a kid, but I remember how painful it was, said Diane Swonk, KPMG's chief economist, to The Observer. That's not where we are today. Stagflation today would require a pretty large increase in unemployment and also a pretty large increase in inflation. There are growing concerns amongst U.S. economists that we could be headed into an extended period of stagflation, what economists call a perfect storm of economic conditions. Now, if you watching lived through the 1970s and you were old enough to observe the change in your own or your parents' lifestyles, then you can appreciate the economic pain that stagflation entails. In our own family of 8, we canceled our milk deliveries from our local milkman and switched to powdered milk. That was not a popular choice in the family. Red meat became increasingly scarce, and the weekly menu often featured sloppy joes. Now, stagflation is defined as an economic cycle characterized by slow economic growth or GDP output, stubborn or rising inflation, and high unemployment. Essentially, a stagnant economy with higher than average inflation. And recent economic indicators show that inflation remains well above the Federal Reserve's target of 2%, with the most recent CPI report showing that headline inflation is coming in at 3.5%. However, in a recent white paper from UBS, it notes that stagflation needs 2 more factors: a period of lax fiscal and monetary policy, plus the appearance of an external supply shock that disrupts the economy. Well, to be honest, presently we have the former, and we could face the latter should we have a global conflict disrupt the flow of oil or other chief commodities. Now, stagflation, it's an economist's catch-22. If the Fed pushes too hard to curb inflation through quantitative tightening or increasing the baseline interest rates, they could exacerbate the unemployment rate. However, if the central bank cuts rates to stimulate a struggling economy slipping into recession, they could stoke the fires of inflation even further. While the Federal Reserve's rate hikes have brought inflation down from its 9.2% high that we saw in June of 2022, both core and headline inflation appear to have become sticky, with the CPI hovering over 3% since last July. Michael Hartnett, Bank of America's chief investment strategist, is sounding the alarm, seeing what he calls stagflationary economic data. The labor market is cracking in the U.S., and at the same time, there isn't a human being in America that thinks inflation is getting to 2%, said Hartnett in a recent Bloomberg TV interview in March. While the U.S. GDP is outperforming other G7 nations, cracks are beginning to form throughout our economy on the broad scale, especially in the commercial and residential real estate markets that are struggling under higher interest rates and with increasing default rates. But more importantly, how would retirees be impacted? Now, for those that saved, their retirement plan likely doesn't factor in the infrequent occurrence of an economic scenario such as stagflation, and that could erode their earnings and their purchasing power. It would also increase the probability that retirees and older Americans may need to provide financial assistance for their adult children. Now, what are your thoughts? Do you think that inflation is a likely outcome of the U.S. economy in the next year or 2? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Also, please share this video on LinkedIn with other mortgage professionals. We appreciate those of you that do that each week. We also have a YouTube channel where you can subscribe. And if you found value in today's episode, if you learned something new, please hit the like button and also comment. And we do have a weekly reverse mortgage news podcast that brings you the latest stories related to reverse mortgage lending and broader economic trends. That's HECM World Weekly. Listeners can find us on Apple Music, Spotify, and Podbean, and we also have a video companion that you can watch as well. Thanks so much for joining us, and be sure to return next week for more reverse mortgage news, commentary, and analysis you'll only find here at Heck and Roll. Have a great week.